There you go. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm pretty sure we are a global audience today. I'm in California. My name is Luna. I'm the program manager for ECHO's Design Leadership Program. I'm here with Carol today for our second fire session together. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to start by sharing with you guys our new video about ECHO's Design Leadership. So let's hit start. I hope you enjoy it.
Design is leadership.
In recent years, we've begun to see that the most successful organizations are the ones that infuse their business with design at the core.
In our 12-week program, you will hear from and interact with some of the world's most highly regarded design and innovation leaders from across the globe. Our exclusive masterclass sessions will give you insights into how design leaders think and act in order to elevate design in their own organizations to deliver exceptional outcomes.
You will participate in more hands-on workshops with design leaders from your region, in which you will deep dive into some of the theory and practical activities behind the masterclass topics.
The Design Leadership Program is for those who want to learn how to manage and grow their team, develop their design vision, act as an advocate and catalyst for design within their organization, and generally navigate the challenging yet rewarding world of design leadership. We know that the realm of design is constantly evolving.
Our biggest goal is to help you develop the skills needed to become a great design leader who can continue to navigate the ever-changing world of business and society over the next decade.
We hope to see you in Season 2 of the Design Leadership Program.
I hope you guys enjoy it. I've been asking for feedback, so please let us know what you think. We're constantly iterating. So now I'm gonna start sharing our slides that will be guiding our conversation today. There's a little bit of spoiler, why not? Anyways, as I said earlier, I'm here today with Carol, hosting Dalia and Andrea. This is a fire session hosted by ECHO's Design Leadership Program and ECHO's Design Thinking School. Today, we're gonna be talking about the challenges of leading design in a startup. My name is Luna, as I mentioned before. I'm the program manager for ECHO's Design Leadership. I'd like to invite you guys to please let us know where you are. I'm quite curious to see who is joining us and from where, what kind of design you do, or what do you do in terms of creativity, innovation, technology. Just share with us, please. It's always interesting to see who is joining us, who we are speaking to. ECHO's is an independent global innovation lab driven by design. We have 3 business models. The one hosting us today, as I mentioned, is the School of Design Thinking. We help business create value and innovation for good. And we help people and organizations master the innovation mindset, skills, and tools. We are a global team. I'm in the US, but we have a big group in Brazil and Australia, now growing in Europe as well, Portugal and Italy. I hope to expand even further. I would love to have more people in the US to join me. It's so hard to be here alone in this time zone. We already graduated over 40,000 people when we were still in person with our students in Rio and São Paulo, and over 70,000 people remotely with our online courses. We are part of Global Design Thinking Alliance. We are the only independent design lab helping with design research among these big names that you see here on the screen. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be participating with them. And a little bit about the program. We have a little less than 3 weeks to go to the launching of the season 2. Carol and I, we studied together for season 1. We are alumni. Even though I work for ACUS, I took the course as well. It's a 12-week program. It's quite a intense journey, I would say, to be quite honest. This is a little bit of the journey map that comes from the understanding of these 4 spheres, which is the importance for you to understand who you are. It is a lot about the way you deal with others. It's about you and others, about you and the outcomes and deliverables. So the products, services, and experience you design. And because we're always designing to someone or somebody, it's a lot about you and the systems that you'll be impacting. This is some of the global master classes for the season 2 lineup. The lineup changes pretty much 90% every season. We have a lot of people that come join us because we conduct a big research a few years back to understand who are the main names helping shape the future of design and design leadership. Again, we start May 9th. It's a 12-week program, so it ends on August 3rd. This season, we do have vacation break for the summertime. If you want to know more about the structure of the course, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm most likely the one who will be talking to you about it and any other kind of conversation regarding design leadership, where are we going, ethics of design. But without much more, I would like to leave Carol to facilitate the workshop. Carol, again, thank you so much for co-facilitating this with me and helping put this together. I know we are almost launching the program and things are a little bit chaotic to be, again, vulnerable and open to everybody else. But please lead us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Luna, again for the invite first, right? As you said, I'm an alumni of the first cohort of the Design Leadership Program, and I'm very happy to be here also hosting these sessions and welcoming Andrea and Dalia as well to talk a little bit about design leadership, especially in a startup, right, which is also my environment. So before I actually give the mic to the ladies, let me first, of course, introduce myself. So I'm Carolina, I'm the head of product design at CoachUp, and I've been a designer since forever. I am completely passionate about design, and I've worked with branding in different areas of design, and I work with product design for 5 years now. And in 2 of these years, I've been deep diving into the leadership world, which is exactly the topic that we have here for today, right? And I wanted to first give the mic to Andrea and Dalia. Maybe if you can introduce yourselves a little bit and also already give us a little insight on how you got in contact and how did you end up becoming all leaders in design and in startups in this case. Maybe we can start with Andrea.
Yes. So hi everybody. I'm Andrea. UX lead at Marley Spoon. Originally from Mexico, but currently living in Berlin. And yeah, my journey towards leadership in startups, it's funny, I would say. I think it comes from the fact that most startups grow from first product teams, tech teams, and then they care about design. So I've always been in the position where I'm one of the first designers in the team, and I see a need of maturity, of path for the teams to grow, and that's basically what's pushed me towards that path of leadership.
Cool. Thank you so much, Andrea. Maybe Dalia?
Hey, my name is Dalia. I lead the UX research function at Miro. I've been there since June of last year, so a little bit under a year. I kind of got into leadership very begrudgingly. It was kind of forced upon me at a certain point in my life. And it took me a really long time to sort of come to that decision. I ended up interviewing a lot of people, I guess, which is apt for a researcher to understand what their experience around leadership was. I was basically in a situation where the team that I was on in my previous company needed a research leader. They struggled to find one, and eventually were like, "Do you want to take it on?" And I think I fell in love with it almost immediately. So that was a bit surprising. It wasn't something that I saw myself doing. And since then, I've kind of gone back and forth between like IC roles, leadership role, craft leadership role, like people management. And I think sort of the people management piece is where I've really found my passion and have been enjoying doing for the past little while.
Cool. All right, that's a very interesting story as well, Dalia. I can relate to that. Also, leadership kind of fell upon on me, and I took it, and in the end, I ended up loving it as well. Right, so I completely understand. I also wanted to start maybe with one question before we deep dive into the leading topic in details and what leading design actually means. But I wanted to first ask you, what do you perceive as the role of design within a startup, right? What do you perceive as, what is the role of a designer in a startup? And especially, what is the role of a design leader in a startup? Would you like to start, Dalia?
Sure. I think I can speak a little bit more to the role of UX research, if that's okay. I'm sure Andrea has a lot to add about the role of design itself, but in both organizations that I've been in, like this one and the one before, research was part of the broader umbrella of design or the broader umbrella of UX. So we always had pretty sort of like tight-knit partnerships with designers. I would say like the role of research, whether you are in a startup or whether you are in a more established company, is always to drive decision-making. We're not there to sort of do research as a curiosity or just to ask questions because we think they're going to be fun to investigate, but really we should think of the role that we play and the impact that we want to have as the extent to which the insights that come out of our research can actually drive decision-making in a meaningful way. I think it's just the kinds of decisions and the way you go about it that changes a little bit in startups versus bigger companies. So I think I saw yesterday someone had posted on LinkedIn that they had done an analysis of the sizes of research team across some of the major tech companies. And I think Google was at the top with over 1,000, which kind of like blew my mind because I've been on teams with dozens of people and I thought that was pretty huge. And I think that when you have research at that scale, there's sort of a lack of scarcity. That means that like you can have research almost entirely being handled by researchers and you can sort of afford to take on like more types of studies. Whereas I think in a smaller company, you sort of have to ruthlessly prioritize and learn how to say no to research that you think isn't necessarily going to drive things forward. And that becomes a really interesting negotiation because you're on the one hand probably trying to educate people about the role of research and the role that it plays, while at the same time having to say no to the types of questions that you think aren't necessarily going to drive decision making or bring about the right impact. So that can be a bit of a challenge that folks who sort of join earlier in smaller companies tend to contend with.
Andrea, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting because, as I said, from experience, usually like in startups, you put so much effort on like, okay, let's build like strong product teams, let's build strong engineering teams, and then as a follow-up comes design, and usually it's the kind of designer who can do it all. No, it's good at UI, good at UX, or like service design and flows. You're at user research, so there's also an expectation that this amazing human is able to recruit people, do analysis, do usability tests, and then by consequence, I think that I might have more experience on that. Like the usability test is not research; it doesn't equal to research. It's part of what research can actually do, but then you have to give up because of priorities all of the other things that you could actually do for innovation. For me, where design stands is in a strategic position between product and tech. We have to work systematically. We have to look ahead. We do look at numbers together with product to understand what are the experiments that we can run, what are the things that we can make better, but at the same time, we're also responsible of bringing this cohesive experience towards our customers. We need to think ahead on like, hey, like how will our product scale? It's not just a decision that you can make immediately and say MVP, yay! You have to be able to see that vision to be able to make the right decisions today, even though we won't probably build that beautiful future at that moment. we need to know where we're going, why we're going there, so that we also understand what are the tech constraints. Can we unlock different teams? Are we creating our own blockers for later iterations, which at the end will probably cause delays on deployment and releases, and none of the product managers want to have that in mind. So I think that's where actually design can bring a lot of value. Plus, of course, bringing the team closer to the customer. And I think that's also where the beauty and the collaboration with research teams, with customer communications teams, with sales team is extremely valuable to really understand how can we combine all of these disciplines and bring an experience that users will enjoy.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing, Andrea. I can also relate to that so much, right? This collaboration and this vision that design brings with the user perception, right? Using all of the data and insights that come together with research to collaborate within the product development is really important. And also what I believe is one of the main forces that we as designers have, right? Especially in startups and not only in companies that are just beginning, but they are still building up and trying to understand their product and release maybe an MVP, right? Or a second smaller version to really start growing the business until they become maybe scale ups like bigger companies like Miro is at the moment, and etc. Where you already have then a more structured team and product, and you start to add up and improve things from there, right? And I wanted to ask you, can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on how is design actually structured in the companies that you've worked in, that you work in at the moment? How did this structure came to be? If you can share, of course, right, more a little bit more about that.
Do you want to go, Andrea?
Dalia, feel free.
Sure. So design, like the way that design is structured at Miro is that we have like 5 different sort of product streams, or this is what we call verticals. And then each of those has sort of like embedded dedicated designers that are owning, particular projects. Usually there's more or less sort of like one-to-one mapping between like a designer and like a substream or a product area. At my previous company before I was at Miro, I was at Shopify. And in addition to having the same structure of like design being embedded, we also sort of had a more horizontal design system team that sort of worked on all of the components and the guidelines that everybody else was consuming. We have a little bit of that at Miro, but they haven't gotten so far deep into the design system side of things compared to the one that we had built at Shopify, which I think you can find at polaris.shopify.com. is a really interesting example of a really comprehensive design system. And that team sort of worked with everyone to sort of figure out the problems that they were trying to solve and the extent to which the components that existed in the design system were meeting their needs, but as well providing guidance for third-party developers who are building apps and integrations for Shopify to sort of be able to provide a consistent experience. Research, I think, has similarities and differences. I don't think of researchers as always embedded in a sort of like one-to-one relationship in terms of like one researcher per team or one researcher per substream. I've seen some teams try to do that in the past. And I think in the long run, it ends up creating interesting challenges in the sense that like, when you think about the product development lifecycle, research usually, or the type of research that sort of researchers strive to do, which is more strategic, more exploratory, more the kind of research that informs the problem, that comes in really heavy at the beginning of product development. Whereas as the process sort of like evolves, the ways in which researchers are involved tends to become a bit more tactical and a bit more lightweight. And especially if you're working on a team where designers or even product managers are comfortable doing their own evaluative testing, more and more the sort of like work shifts onto folks other than researchers. And when you have a researcher that's sort of by design embedded, like meant to be embedded in a specific team in the long term that way, I've seen situations where people end up sort of twiddling their thumbs towards the end of a project because the ways in which they can contribute is sort of diminished. And at the same time, the team has this mentality that the researcher belongs to them and the researcher has to continue working on that team. So what I like to do instead is sort of like think of researchers as being assigned to a broader problem space or a bigger research question that sometimes can map one-to-one to a particular problem domain, but gives them a little bit of flexibility to like sort of stretch outside of that and collaborate with different teams. So it's less like I'm the researcher who is assigned to this particular team, and more so I'm the researcher who is thinking about this problem space and building expertise in this problem space. And that means most of my time I work with this team, but it also means that I can reach out and like work with this team as well, or sort of like identify opportunities for sort of cross-team collaboration and think of like how to expand the questions that I'm asking to sort of take into account some of the other things that other teams are working on. Because at the end of the day, like users don't see things from the perspective of our org structures. There's no lines in the sand with regards to what they're experiencing. And so by kind of giving researchers a little bit of like that flexibility to broaden their scope by thinking of a problem space, we're able to better reflect the reality of our users and in a way sort of research things in a way that makes more sense rather than just being tied to specific teams and org structure.
Interesting. Before I give the mic to Andrea, I have a follow-up question for you, Dalia, on that. How is that collaboration of the designers, product designers, user experience designers with the researchers in this case, in this structure? How does it work?
So I think it, again, sort of like depends on like the stage of the projects that they're in. I think that when researchers are particularly earlier on thinking about like the problem domain and like strategy, designers are definitely involved in that part of the process, but I think they tend to sort of like partner a little bit more closely with the product managers who are sort of thinking more of like, what is the problem that we should solve and like, what should that look like in the long term? Mm-hmm. After that, we see interesting collaboration. Like my favorite type of sort of research and design partnership, which I don't think happen enough, to be honest, is one of sort of early iterative concept like development. So the idea that like when you have a researcher and a designer who are partnered closely together, and the researcher is sort of like thinking of these research questions, and the designer is coming up with like artifacts that are designed specifically to help learn and to answer those questions, understanding that that might not necessarily be the final concept or the final solution. And then you kind of like learn through the prototype, and then that brings about new questions, and you sort of work in this iterative, like highly nimble fashion. I've seen that be a really interesting partnership that sort of, I feel like it gives both sides more of an appreciation for the other one does and feels like a true partner. It doesn't become an issue of like the designer just came up with some stuff and then just handed it off to a researcher to go do some research on it, or a researcher did some exploratory research and then handed the designer a bunch of insights and let them go off and sort of come up with whatever design that they wanted. It becomes a sort of intertwined way of working where it's like, how can research serve design and how can design serve research? And how can we sort of like think about these two things as fully intertwined as opposed to separate disciplines that just come together at predefined touch points.
Interesting. I do have another follow-up question, but it will change the subject. So I will actually now give the mic to Andrea and maybe share a little bit with us on how is your design team structured and on that, and then we can move on to another topic.
Yes, so Marley's point, I think it's really interesting that like understanding the concept of where we are also as a design team, as a research team, because it's right now I would say we're still in a journey trying to find how and where we belong within the company, how we're growing, and we're basically what is the future structure of the team. So over a year and a half ago when I joined the company, we had only 2 designers, one designer who was there for over a year and one designer who just recently joined. And they were working more like agency-like. So we had like different product teams and they will send a couple of requests. The design team had a particular design board. They will take over a couple of stories and then work for several sprints in a specific task and then deliver and continue. Obviously, the more the evolution of the digital team started like being like too much for the team, and it became quite stressful, not only for the designers who didn't manage to see their work actually like being done to the quality level that they were expecting, but also even for like engineers who had to wait for the designers to finish the sprint and then realize that they were not able to build half of the stuff. So we had to like descope a lot of things, and that was frustrating basically for everybody. When I joined Marley Spoon, one of my biggest tasks was, first of all, hiring, and second, how can we integrate design with agile teams? How do we make these teams way more collaborative, and how do we introduce research? So actually my first big hire was, we need to have UX research as a separate topic. Again, we cannot have the expectation that this designer is actually going to solve like the whole problem, the whole spectrum. So we're going to start dividing paths. So right now we actually have a research team who works closely with the data team and works closely with our customer communications and insights team. And then we have the product designers, who are the ones who are working closely with the tech teams, with the product managers, and who are like really working on the strategy, on the features that we're going to be releasing. We're also gone through the evolution from being platform focus. So we had the division between mobile and web. So we have a designer working in web, a designer working in mobile apps. And although it worked for a while, we are now right now at the stage where, okay, we're creating too many blockers to be able to develop any kind of information. We have now so many stakeholders, because we have to talk with the web product manager, and then we have to talk with the mobile product manager, and we are at the stage where our product doesn't really make any sense. So we recently also switching on more on the problem area. So now we have a commerce team, which is focusing on, okay, how do we increase our basket size? We're also moving towards what we call the account experience. So for those customers who already have an account as part of the journey in Marley Spoon, and everything related to their taste profile, settings, and so on. And we also have the acquisition team, which basically means like, how do we acquire new customers? So everything related to the landing pages, homepage experience, and funnel, which is making way more sense. There is now also in this transition, the obvious need to start building a design system team, because now we're getting to that part of the maturity where everybody has a little bit of control over two platforms in the experience, but we're making so many decisions at the same time that we need to keep control of the consistency, that we need to control the quality of the components that we're creating. And I think that's the next part of the journey for the team, to really start working, because it is a lot of work. I mean, sometimes what product managers and engineers don't see is also the amount of effort that you need to put into setting up the right setup in Figma. How do you do the handover to developers? How do you also create this kind of playground for not only for yourself as a designer, but to have that kind of collaboration with a researcher, with your product manager? How do you also make sure that when you're prototyping and ideating, you can create like quick prototypes that can be tested quite easily? And this all comes from actually having a setup that allows you to do that work quite fast. So we are at that stage of the journey, which is quite exciting, I would say. On the other side, for the research team, we work really closely with the customer-facing team. So basically everything that touches base with our customers, they work on projects. So they work a little bit more longer term. We try to align with most of the product teams ahead, so that we can have a better calendar and a better overview. When are the things that we need to plan? When do we need to start recruiting? Do we need to start recruiting? Are we going to do on moderated sessions? And of course, in our case,
we have different markets. So we also need to make sure to align our product to a specific market so that we also understand like, okay, this is an insight which is globally affecting the whole company. It's globally affecting our product. And this is a particular localized problem that we need to solve for this particular market.
All right. You touched some very interesting things on what exactly are the challenges of leading in a startup, right? Because it goes exactly on this journey. It's very similar also to what we and the design team that I lead at CoachUp went through, right? So we started with 2 to 3 designers, and then when you're 15 or 20 designers, you have to have different structures, and you have to rethink about how the organization is structured so that it makes sense, not only from the team perspective, but also from the organization and the product and tech perspective and the collaboration of all of these teams, right? And this, as I believe, is one of the biggest challenges of exactly working and leading in a startup, right? And I wanted to hear a little bit more from you, girls, on exactly that, right? What have you experienced so far? Andrea is working in a less mature companies, a younger company, let's say like that, right? So you're still structuring a lot of things. Dalia already joined a company that was a little bit more structured and bigger also, but that is also facing a hyper growth, especially in the last few years, right? And I'm sure you've experienced a lot of challenges in that as well. And maybe if you can share a little bit of those with us. Dalia, if you want to go.
Yeah, I think, so like the work that I've been doing at Miro is sort of like my 3rd time around building a team almost from scratch. And it's been, I mean, the first time, as I was describing earlier, I kind of fell backwards into management, and it was not something that I was doing with a lot of intention. Like it was more like, oh, there's just fires everywhere. Let's just hire people and try to put out those fires, and trying to learn what it meant to be a manager at the same time. The second time I did it was also with Shopify, but I came to their Berlin office, which was a startup acquisition. And so they very much functioned like a startup. They had no researchers. They had like very few designers. And I think my interest in taking on that challenge was to sort of think of like, okay, knowing what I know now, having done it the first time around, what would I do differently? And how would I want to structure this? And then part of the appeal of coming to Miro was to get to do that again and thinking, okay, 3rd time around, what can I take as lessons from the first couple of times and what I would do differently? And I think what I've learned through these experiences is that I don't think there's necessarily a one size fits all sort of structure or path that's going to work for everyone. I think the thing that is more important is to recognize that it's something that you have to do by design and be intentional about rather than letting it happen to you. I think when you're in a small company and where it feels like it's all hands on deck, there's a million things to be done every day, it's easy to sort of think of like, okay, the best way in which I can help is just to grow the team or add more bodies to sort of help with the problem. And then eventually you're faced with a reality that sort of forces you to rethink, like, okay, do I need to restructure? Do I need to like think about how the team, like where the team fits, how they fit? And it just feels like, yeah, it's stuff that ends up happening to you whenever it does happen. And usually something breaks before you come to that realization. Whereas like, yeah, one of the things that I've learned that I'm surprisingly really excited about is team design. And to think about that from the very beginning and be like, okay, not just I need to hire someone today, but more like if this person was to stay at the company for the next 2 to 3 years, what would their role look like? How would it evolve? Like maybe you don't have all the answers worked out, but if you can sort of have a sort of convincing idea of, okay, this is what this role could look like. This is how it's going to grow. This is potentially the opportunities for this person to like go into. Then to me, that feels like, okay, there's something here and it's worthwhile hiring a person rather than just, I'm thinking of the short term and trying to put out a fire that exists at the very moment. So I think, yeah, I think it's sort of, it's hard to put yourself in those shoes and kind of try to think of anything beyond the immediate when you're juggling so many things. But I think at the same time, it's something that's good to think about as well. And like I said, I remember I had a manager who had told me when she became my manager, I was her first report. And she said to me, she was really excited about team design. And I thought that was the weirdest thing. I was like, who could possibly get excited about team design? But then you get into it and you're like, there's it's kind of a design challenge. It's an interesting people problem. You have to take into account like a lot of constraints. You have to think of the short term and the long term. You have to sort of like think about, to what extent do you want to be nimble and to what extent is stability important? One of the reasons that, as I mentioned earlier, we try to attach researchers to problem spaces rather than individual teams or products is because one of the biggest strengths of a researcher is when they really become a problem domain expert in whatever problem it is that they're researching, because essentially a researcher has to sort of always think ahead or know more in a way than the rest of their team, or think ahead of their team and anticipate questions the team hasn't thought about. And if you're constantly yanking them around from one area to another and expecting them to sort of pick up on that new knowledge and that new skill to the point where they can push their team forward, they're not really going to thrive. So how I think of it is like the product and the tech that we work on and the teams come and go, but the human problems are more permanent. So if I can attach a researcher to a problem space and like a user need or like a bigger question, that also means that, and I've seen this actually work out in reality, we become less susceptible to reorgs, which every company goes through, because the team can change, but what the researcher is thinking about doesn't necessarily change. And it just means that now the people that they're going to be collaborating with might look a little bit differently, or what their day-to-day might change, but the problem that they've been thinking about doesn't really change. So these are all sort of things to take into account. I think of like, just thinking of the long term, the short term, thinking about like what the health of the team could look like, thinking about how you want your people to specialize, and really being intentional about those decisions as early as you can be. Not that you'll have a perfect solution, but at least even just thinking about them and being intentional, I think can be really helpful.
Thank you for sharing. Indeed, team design can definitely be a topic, right? Because you not only have to think about the skills and the hard skills, the soft skills, but exactly what you said, right, Dalia? Where will that role be? What will be that role in 2 years, right? And the organization is constantly changing, right? Especially in startups, and the speed is change. And it's usually when you work in a startup, if you're in December, you look back to January, it was a completely different company, a different product, and a lot of things have changed, right? So having this perception of the long term is definitely challenging, but it's also really important because it gives the team the perspective, right, of what's to come, where can I grow, where are the opportunities, how can I grow as a designer, as a professional, and etc. So it's definitely one of the most interesting and challenging topics of design leadership, for sure. Andrea, would you like to share what have been the main challenges for you?
I actually agree a lot with Dalia. I think the biggest challenge, it's the team. I remember I would say my first lead position, I was extremely excited and I started like, okay, we need people, like we have like so much work that we're never going to manage to do anything. And I got for the first time the approval to hire an intern, and I was extremely excited. We went like, they gave me like, okay, you have 2 weeks to hire someone, and I got someone immediately. I was like, yes, it's done. And I had like a huge to-do list, like, okay, these are all of the things that, all of the tasks that we need to have done. I created a beautiful presentation. The first day arrived, I gave it to this amazing designer, by the way. And then at the end of the week, we got something extremely confusing. I was like extremely disappointed on like the quality of the work. This was not what I meant. And first I was like, oh my God, like did I make the wrong decision on hiring this person? How is it possible that this is the actual result? And then I realized, well, I actually never even took like time to sit with this person to understand, first of all, like to introduce them properly to the companies, introduce them to the teams, to what we were looking for. And I think that's one of those moments where I actually realized like, okay, let's take a step back, and there is a bigger process to be built. How are we going to be hiring people? How are we going to be scaling this team? How are we going to evolve? And as you mentioned before, like in a startup, 6 months ago was completely different. 6 months ago, you get certain kind of budget. And 6 months later, you have a different kind of budget now, a different kind of problem. So you still need to maintain that flexibility on where the team is going. But if you focus on the people, if you focus on where they want to grow, how they want to grow, you start and you actually start listening, you can start designing these plans, you can start understanding where and how you want to take that team, where this structure also lives inside the company, and how the company also can support the team to build this design culture, to build this career path for designers, which might be aligned with what product managers have, with what engineers have, but they also live by itself. It is different. We have different expertise. We have also different goals. And it is also important that the company understands this. I think also one of the biggest challenges is being transparent enough with your team, where you as a company stand. I think that's also part of when you're recruiting people and where you're expecting this person to stay, you need to be able to tell them like, hey, what you're looking for is something that I cannot offer you right now. And I think that's part of that journey. It is not only costly for the company, but it's also exhausting to have someone who only comes for 6 months, 3 months, even a year. We want people to stay. We want people to build this expertise. And reality, if we just say like the company, like, yeah, this is the best place to work, like you want this, like, yeah, we have it, like career paths and growth and all, you will see that this person will leave the company. And especially in this ecosystem of startups, it's so easy to move that you will lose people. So understanding where you're going, the flexibility, what you can offer and what you cannot, it also brings the team to a level of, okay, I'm transparent enough to tell you that this is not enough for me. And also me as the lead, I'm transparent enough to tell you like, yes, we're building towards that. Yes, we can offer you this, or you know what, I'm sorry, but no, I cannot offer you this at the moment, but I can offer you this and this and this. And then it's also like a mutual decision on how do we move forward? How do we collaborate? Is there another opportunity within the department? Is there another opportunity within the company, and so on?
That is very true, right? Because in the end, recruiting is a two-way street, right? You are recruiting someone to work within your team, but the team is also recruiting that company, right? Is that company suitable also for them? And people are different. They have different expectations, different needs at some depending on their time in their life or what's happening. I've even myself have been in interviews where candidates have told me, oh, because I really want to work on a company that has design well structured with all of the processes and etc. And I had to say like, I'm really sorry, but we are in a process of making those processes and implementing and improving a lot of things. If you want to take the challenge with us, we are happy to welcome you. But if we're not, then we are probably not the best place for you at this point in time. Maybe in the future, things will be different, right? But recruiting is indeed a complicated task for design leaders, right? Because you're not only you're managing the expectations of someone that is joining a new company, has a lot of curiosity, wants to work in a new team, has a lot of different expectations, wants to grow in certain teams, and you have to be transparent and know where you can or you will be able to support that person to help them grow as well or not, right? So it's a very, very important topic indeed as well. And you also touched one other thing, Andrea, on self-awareness as leaders. And I would love to hear from the both of you, what have been the biggest learnings for you yourself as leaders, right? Andrea, you shared quickly one example before about that, but I would love to hear a little bit more about the both of you. Like, what have been the biggest learnings that you had in these challenging times as scaling a team, building a team from scratch, or scaling a team, maybe even trying to evolve the maturity of design within your companies and etc. Maybe Dalia, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like a million things are racing through my head. I'm like, ooh, there's definitely a lot there. I think self-awareness is a really interesting one, because again, like my previous lead, who I had mentioned, who when she became a manager, I was her only report, and she sort of like learned to be a manager by leading me, and I learned a lot from her. And she was actually part of the reason why I never thought of myself as becoming a leader, because I thought she was so good at what she did that I just couldn't imagine myself, you know, doing service to anyone the way that she did, or being that good at my job. And she used to tell me that she's learned, she had like built out a team, made a couple of mistakes along the way as she was learning. And one of the things that she mentioned to me is that she had learned that beyond all else in terms of like technical qualifications and skills and all of this sort of stuff, the two most important things that you can find in someone you're hiring are self-awareness and a growth mindset. Because everything else can be acquired through those things. Like if you're someone who wants to grow and who wants to learn, then we can create those opportunities for you. But you also have to be self-aware enough to understand what it is that you have to grow and learn in, and to understand where your own sort of challenges are, so that you can seek the help that you need. And so to me, like those have sort of become almost like deal breakers, in a way that like on both a personal and professional level, I don't think that I could work with someone, or I can lead someone who doesn't have either of those qualities. And I know firsthand that it can be very draining to work with people who don't have a sense of self-awareness as well. And so they also become sort of qualities that I, as a leader, sort of try to emulate for my team, and sort of try to uphold in the way that I work with people as well. And a lot of the things that we've talked about, you know, so far in this session in terms of like planning, and I really appreciate like Andrea's points about, and your point as well, Carolina, about being upfront about what you can and can't offer. I think that is a self-awareness piece, as much as there is a temptation to sort of like hire and scale teams. The reality is that you are investing in this person, and this person is investing in you, and you want to enter that relationship on the same level of understanding. And you know, I'm not under the illusion that anyone who joins my team is going to be there for the rest of their lives. Like that would be great, but you know, people eventually have to move on to different things. But I'd like to think that we're sort of maximizing the opportunity that we have together and the time that we have together. And I hope that they get something out of that experience, because I'm also like on a personal level investing in someone, and want to put in the time to like not just manage them, but figure out ways in which I can help them grow. I feel like I'm rambling on a little bit, but yeah, just wanted to add that like I think the piece on self-awareness definitely struck a chord with me. I think your question initially was about sort of like more the challenges of leading teams within that startup environment. Is that correct?
Yes, I was thinking about what has been the biggest learnings, right, when you experience those challenges in leading the design teams.
I think like the biggest challenges for me, honestly, like I think the biggest challenges have been more on a personal level. I mean, I think it's intertwined with the professional as well, but sort of like learning more and more to separate yourself from the job. It's part of the reason why I, again, was hesitant to take on leadership, is because I was sort of like, oh, I don't want to be responsible for people's health and happiness, and having to learn that like, I'm not responsible for their health and happiness. I'm responsible for other things in their lives, but I'm not the person who like gets to make or break everything. And learning to separate myself from that, and to sort of like not get so sucked in the ways that I care about people. And then as you become sort of like responsible for a bigger and bigger team, and having more and more conversations at higher level of leadership, learning to sort of like let things roll. Like that's still a learning day to day from me. And I think, you know, I'm still the kind of person who like kind of gets nervous after I talk to my CPO or CEO, and kind of go through the conversation in my head like a million times over. And like, did I say that right? Is it going to impact how they see research? And I'm learning more and more to just be like, they're not thinking about it, and it's fine. There's not going to be like any single thing that makes or breaks the team. Just learning that sort of like separation, essentially, of what I'm pouring into the role, and like where the line is. And I think that theme has been constant for me. It's just changed in the way that it's manifested. Whereas in the beginning, it was sort of like learning to draw that boundary between myself and the team. And now it's like learning to draw that boundary between how I'm experiencing things and like the tough conversations that I'm having and like the anxiety that comes with that. And then just sort of like learning to place a little bit more of a buffer there. And I think it's going to be a constant learning for me. It's like journey for me. It's just the way that I'm personally wired, but I think I've tried to become a little bit faster at bouncing back from getting sucked into everything. Like I've learned to like, for it to take me first days, then hours, now a few minutes to just bounce back out of something and sort of remember to put that buffer and to not fully get sucked into everything that's happening day to day.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of new empathy that comes with becoming a leader, right? I remember the first one-on-ones that I did with my team, and I was nervous. And then I remembered when I was nervous to talk to my managers. And then I started thinking about, oh, are they also nervous to talk to me and all of that, right? There is a new level of empathy and you start seeing the two sides of the coin, right? So it's really, indeed, really interesting in that.
For sure.
Andrea, what about you? What have been the biggest learnings or the main challenges you've been?
I think learnings, like to add to what Ali was saying, I think the fact to feel comfortable with not knowing everything is one of the key elements. I think I also have like a tendency to like, I'm going to do it like perfect and it has to be like this. And it's a little bit on like a Hermione Granger, like I know it all, like I studied, I'm prepared. And if you have to ask someone, I'll be the one who has all of the answers. And the more I was growing as a designer, the more I step into leadership roles, the more I realized like I have no idea what is going on. And that gave me a lot of anxiety. And I think the biggest learning is to be comfortable. First of all, I realized that half of the people in the meetings with C-level, with head of whatever, even engineer, which was a particular scary thing for me because I'm not a too technical person. So I had fear going into that meetings, like, are they going to speak about something that I have no idea how to interact? And then realizing like, oh my God, they also have no idea about what I'm doing. And they also have no idea about what they're doing. So we're all okay with that. So cool, then I'm going to go with the flow, like fair. And I think like having this in mind, like they also don't know, gave me the confidence to be able to ask and to feel free to say like, you know what, I'm not an expert on this, but like you are. So you show me, you tell me, you make me the expert, and I will make you the expert as well on my field, because I'm comfortable with the things that I know. And the more I ask, the more I get comfortable with this fact, then the more I learn, and then I become the expert. And at the same time, I also realized that part of the design of the team or creating this team is that I'm going to hire people who are better than me and who are experts in specific fields that not, and that I also don't need to be better than them in order to be the manager or leading the team. I need to be able to enable them to do their work. I need to be there to make sure that they don't have a blocker, that if they have a problem, I can support them, I can direct them, I can make that connection, that link with a specific department, I can guide them through specific topics. And that for me relieved me of my anxiety, although sometimes it comes and goes. But it just also made the conversations easier. I think also, Caro, you made a good point of like, do I feel like nervous going into one-on-ones? Like how is my team member also feeling? And like having this ability of like, hey, I have no idea, but you junior designer or you researcher, you know better, like you tell me what is your opinion, how would you deal with this? You're also empowering them to make the right decisions, and at the same time creating this environment like it's okay to fail, we're learning and we will see, and then we're going to take our time to reflect on what happened and make sure that we make better decisions or different decisions next time.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of trust in there, right? Because in the end, you said something quite important. It's actually good that you hire someone that is more experienced than you or that knows better, right? And you have to trust them and showing that trust, because they will, in the end, they will do a fantastic job and you will guide them. And it's a learning process as well, especially during that transition of being an IC and going into leadership, right? Where you start doing the operational design work and you're just supporting the others. So there is a lot of personal growth in there as well, right? Learning to delegate, learning to trust the team, and etc. It's indeed, I guess, a constant process as well for all of us. Thank you, girls, so much. Before I invite you to give maybe your final thoughts, I wanted to ask the crew today if they have any questions that they would like to ask for us. Maybe you can just ask in the chat if you have any questions they would like to hear from us. Then I will give it 3, 2, 1. All right. Then maybe Dalia, Andrea, would you like to share any final thoughts on the challenges of leading design in a startup before we finish for today? Dalia, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, I think I would say that one of the most challenging parts of leading in a startup is also one of the most fun. And I think that's a little bit in the chaotic nature of things. I mean, Miro is more of a scale up stage, but I feel like we're still kind of have, you know, an environment where I wake up in the morning and I think I'm going to do one thing, but my day ends up like looking completely different. And like there's opportunity everywhere and you can sort of roll up your sleeves and get involved wherever you can. And having gone through that almost exact same transition with my previous company where it was a few hundred people when I joined and it grew to be like 10,000. Watching it go through that really gave me an appreciation for those early days and that chaos and the feelings that it's not like everybody had a very specific role that they could not step outside of those boundaries. If you wanted to get something done, you just tap people on the shoulder and work together on it. I think that's magical. I think that's something that shouldn't be taken for granted. And especially as leaders, the amount of autonomy that you have in shaping things, in trying different things and seeing what works and learning and evolving is something that you definitely don't see as much as companies scale. So I think my final thoughts is just to savor that and enjoy it and, see the double side of that fact that chaos is actually also kind of a gift at the same time.
Fully agree on that. It's definitely not boring, right? It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Andrea, what about you?
I think, especially if any of you is thinking to step into a leadership role, if you're interested into what happens on the other side, my advice would be try it, do it. I think the decisions are not necessarily forever. You have a place to grow and see, do you like it? To experience what it's like to be on the management side, what it's like to be on the strategy side. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. And then you can step and then decide okay, I feel comfortable or being a principal designer, a staff designer, and so on. But I think it is an interesting challenge. There's always this moment when you're a senior designer where you're wondering oh, should I go towards this path or this path? And for me, it's always try it and be open with your manager and explore that possibility to see if this is something for you. I think we need more design leaders. We need more people who understand what it takes to build research teams, what it takes to build a product design path. And we cannot expect that product or tech are going to actually build something that it's meant to be scalable for our disciplines. And I think if it comes within us who are in doing the job, it's even better because we understand the pain. We went through it, we mature with it. And at the end, you might not be officially designing the product or the service, but you're designing the team that will make that happen, that will make that product, that service successful. So I think it's always try it. If you feel interested, go for it, look for a mentor, look for someone who you admire. It doesn't necessarily have to be a design manager. It can also be any kind of manager, but having this space to ask questions, because at the end you're dealing with people, and I guess that's always the scary part on like how do I deal with people who are similar to me or who are not similar to me, who like have like completely different ways on dealing with things, but at the end they do the job. So it creates a lot of growth with yourself. And I think that's the beauty of it, and what I love the most about my job, and being able to also reflect about myself, about my job, and like where we're going to take our team to the, where and how we're going to take the team in the next upcoming months.
Perfect final words, Andrea. Thank you so much. For those that are actually interested in becoming a leader, becoming a manager, we also have our final fire session next Monday is exactly on that topic, on becoming or not to become a design manager, right? So join us if you want. And I want to thank you girls so much for joining. It's been really good to chat with you about the challenges, the good sides, the interesting things that happens in design leadership in startups. And again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you all to those that have watched this session as well. And of course, thank you, Luna, for hosting us.
My pleasure. Thank you for the insights. It's always good to have different perspectives, because when we hear that everybody's going through the same challenges, it kind of gives us a little bit of energy to keep moving forward with our personal lives and personal challenges within our own company. So it is quite insightful. I believe that's the reason why the chat was on fire, with everybody like either agreeing or we're like, oh my God, I'm facing the same challenge. So I appreciate the vulnerability, first of all, because I think that's also a leadership skill. For those participating here, the fire session wouldn't be as exciting if it wasn't for everybody sharing their comments, and for the guests as well. So there's a 15% off discount. I would be super happy to hop on a call with those who have questions about design leadership or the program or the structure of the program. This is my email address. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And one more gift. This is a free ebook from our first season. And we have a second ebook coming up in a few days. So make sure to download this, start reading, and you're going to be updated once we have the answers from the masterclasses of season 2. It's quite insightful. I read both, and I know there's a lot for us to keep bringing back. It should be like the nightstand book that you come back every now and then, or the office book that you come back every now and then when we need some inspiration. So thank you again for being here. And I'll see you guys very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.